Today I have Dr. Effie with me, and we are going to be talking about the truth about dating after a toxic marriage and how to deal with triggers once you get into a healthy relationship after a toxic marriage. So, Dr. Effie, welcome. Dr. Effie is a clinical psychologist and single mom out of Melbourne, Australia. So excited that you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we are here today. First, we're going to share some of our stories and then talk about helping you deal with these triggers that both of us have experienced in dating after a toxic marriage. So, a little bit of background on us. We connected recently and realized that our stories are so similar. We both came out of toxic marriages a few years ago, and we were both dating around the same time, around COVID. And we want to share just what it was like for us so that if you see yourself in our stories, just to help you have hope and feel like you can move on from a toxic marriage. So let's do it. Dr. Effie, what was it like for you coming out of a toxic marriage?
Mm. Initially it was a relief because I was just pleased that I left that very toxic situation, and I could start my life fresh, and so on. But, then reality hit and I had to really process how I'm going to navigate this life. And as you mentioned, I'm a single mum. I've got three children that were quite young at the time. So there was a lot to navigate and figure out. And initially I just went into hibernation. I didn't really want to talk to anyone. I was embarrassed, by what had happened, which I've now moved past. But yeah, at the time, that was a really tricky time for me. What about for you after your toxic marriage?
Yeah, I can actually relate to what you shared, like both the relief, but then it being very difficult. And it was it was a very, very tumultuous time for me. I actually started dating relatively quickly after getting out of that marriage. I actually didn't mean to. Like, I wasn't setting out to start dating right away, but I met someone. And so initially it was so exciting, like, oh, wow, I have this new relationship. And things seemed okay in the beginning. But then very shortly I realized, oh no, I got myself into another toxic relationship. So I eventually had to leave that relationship. And then by the time I left, it was like I was going through a double breakup. Like, I was grieving my marriage, but then I was also grieving this abusive relationship I had been in. So it was really, really difficult for a long time. And I took a long time, like almost a year and a half, off of all dating, like meeting anybody new, just to focus on my healing. Because yeah, it really took me out for a while.
Can relate to a lot of that. It's you do want to hide and get away from everything. After some time, it can feel quite confronting to face the world.
Yes, exactly. Because I was going to ask you, like, what was the first thing that you did? Because you described feeling relief, but then it feeling difficult. Yeah, what was your first step?
So, I think after taking something like maybe 6 months to just focus on my kids and making sure that they're okay, and getting through my work and just getting through kind of the basic needs of all of us. After some time, I just had this itch to kind of start living again. And I remember just waking up one day and thinking, okay, I think I want to go out a bit more now. So it started off, going out with friends, and then I got curious about dating apps. So that came out as well.
Nice,
And that
nice.
was quite an eye-opening experience, because those things were not around when both of us first got married.
Nope. No, they were not. It's a whole like wild world out there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But it felt amazing to just put myself out there and get out of my comfort zone and do different things and meet new people. That was really amazing and refreshing.
Yes. I came to a similar point because one of the first things I did was focus on my healing. Like after the initial breakup, or not excuse me, not the initial breakup, after I got divorced and then got into that other relationship, I was like, I need to heal. This is all I need to do. So I did a lot of coaching, a lot of therapy, a lot of subconscious work. That was the thing that really helped me. And then I did get to a point where I wanted to just start talking to people again, and I started going onto online forums and
Mhm.
just talking about what I was going through and sharing, you know, what it was like being in this relationship, both of these
Mm.
relationships. And I eventually ended up meeting my partner that way through one of the forums. So yeah, I had this similar feeling of like, okay, like done all this healing. Now I do want to start putting myself out there and being real and being vulnerable and authentic.
Mm. It's interesting, for me, it was like the other way around because
Yeah.
first I started putting myself out there. And when I put myself out there, as much as I enjoyed all the changes and the new experiences, that's when I actually realized that there were triggers, but also just lots of things I still had to work on that, I was learning about myself. And so for me, it was more, just doing all these like self-development sort of courses and also seeking different kinds of supports and learning more about myself, understanding myself better. But yeah, I
Yeah.
took a break from the dating apps to kind of really, a bit like you at that time, like just really navigate that. And just when I got bored in COVID and thought, okay, I'm a bit bored and lonely now, let's try these dating apps again. For me, that's when I met someone.
I love that. Yeah, because we met someone around the same time,
Yeah.
and I was off and on the apps like before I started to do that healing work because for some reason I was just like, no, I just have to keep trying to meet somebody. Like that was my mindset at the time, and so eventually I was like, this is not working. Like I need to heal. But yeah, then we met our partners around the same time, which is just so cool.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So speaking of dating. We both have some interesting experiences. How did you know what to do when you were dating after coming out of your marriage and being on apps for like the first time ever? Did you know
Yeah.
what to do?
I had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what dating apps were out there. I mean, you hear about some of them, but I started with one. And when I matched with someone, I had no idea what I was supposed to even write
Yeah.
to connect with this person, that I had to Google it. What do you say as a
Yes.
first line, and it just ended up with a wave high emoji. So that was a start. But so no, I had no idea what to do. But like anything else, the more you experience it, the more you learn from trial and error, what works, what doesn't work. And so I just sort of gradually figured out that way. Made lots of mistakes, made lots of wrong choices, because what you see behind the screen is not often what you get in real life in person when you meet them. I'm sure you found too.
Yes. I have found that. Yes, pictures do not always look like what the person actually looks like. Yes, I had that. Um, Yeah, I had similar experiences where like here maybe where we differ is I thought I knew what I was doing. I was like, "Oh, I know how to date." And I would just go on and talk to people and I would be drawn to all the wrong things and yeah, just honestly like I realized that I kept meeting the same people, like the same unavailable types of men and the same men that were kind of mean and like I could tell I was like this person's going to end up being abusive. And so that's when I was like, "Okay, I need to really take a time out, figure this out." And so I actually learned so much about how to date to find a healthy relationship. And just, I was consuming all this information and that really helped. But yeah, I made a ton of mistakes along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's easy to make those mistakes. I think also it's not just even on those dating apps, the appearance of someone that may be different. It's personality too. You come across
Right.
very confident when you're just texting
Yes.
as well, right? So,
Oh, for sure. I'm remembering something that happened back when I was in this abusive relationship and he would break up with me sometimes and during one of those times I would go on the dating apps. Not that you should do that. That's not a good thing to do, but I did that. And I remember talking to this man and he sounded so like positive, so upbeat, so excited, so happy, like lots of emojis, lots of exclamation marks. And then I meet this guy and he's like totally opposite, like just very chill, kind of like monotone. And I was like, I couldn't, I was like, what happened? Like there was such a disconnect between how
yeah,
he was over the messages and how he was in person. It really
yeah,
blew my mind.
yes, yeah, I can totally relate to all of
Yeah.
that.
do you have like a funny story from your dating experiences?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say if we use an appearance one, some people put pictures when they're much younger. Um,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so someone showed up and looked very different, and I didn't recognize him, and we were meeting in a bar, and I was approaching the bar, and turns out that as I was approaching, he was approaching from this way, and he's waving to me like he can recognize me, and says hi, and as I'm getting close, I'm thinking, who's this? And said, oh, hi Effie, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my date. Okay. I said, oh, you look different. Um,
Yeah.
and I just had to go along with it. But it was such a, like you said, like such a disconnect that it was very difficult to kind of get into it as a result, because
Yeah.
I kept thinking
Yeah.
I'm meeting somebody else.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that's
People
that.
can show
But
up really differently.
yes, but I've also had the completely different personality as well, where someone comes across either maybe very flirtatious, very confident, and then you meet them and it's like getting blood out of a stone. I have to
Yeah.
really initiate the conversation. So
Yes. I've
stories
had
like
that too. Yeah. Oh, dating these days is definitely challenging, but yeah, we did figure it out eventually.
yes,
We found someone. And so I'm curious, like when you realized what you were doing wasn't working when it came to dating, what was your next step? Like how did you recalibrate and find the partner that you're with now?
yeah, great question. So I just took a break from it, because it was getting frustrating,
Yeah.
and felt like I had enough. And also, it was quite timely that then COVID came along, because that meant everybody took a break from
Right.
dating, really. So I focused on other things and actually navigating that and lockdowns and that sort of thing. But as I said, as it got kind of a bit lonely and a bit boring, I started going on those dating apps again. And what came to my mind at that time was, not even on purpose, but as I was looking through profiles, I saw someone that was very different to
Hmm.
one I had clicked on before. And something drew me to him. He looked different to others that I had gone for before. He sounded different, but there was something very intriguing about him that just sort of grabbed my attention. And I thought, let's go for someone different. Let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so I did, and it was the best decision I've ever made. And
Yeah.
really taught me that, if you want a different result, you need to do something different. Is really the bottom line.
Yes. That's so true. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was for me too. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was so pleasantly surprised. So we,
Yeah.
we just initially chatted, and then we said, let's have a phone chat. And we had our first phone chat that night, and we spoke for 2 hours, and it could have gone on all night. Like, we just never ran out of things to talk about. And then
Oh,
the next day, again, another 2 hours, and so on. So that went on for a while, and then we met in person, and it was amazing. And it's been like that ever since. There's been ups and downs, but it's been
right.
amazing on the whole.
We'll talk about those. Yeah, yeah. No, but that's so amazing. It like you realized you had to do something totally different to get a different result. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about for you? How did you eventually figure out what you're doing? And
Yeah, well, like I said, I took that break after realizing I'm just meeting the same people. Like, what am I doing wrong here? It was that kind of a moment, like, what is going wrong? How do I figure this out? So it felt like I was figuring out how to do relationships from scratch. It was like taking all the stuff that I thought I knew about relationships and dating, which was like, oh, I just go for someone that I like and that I'm attracted to, and like that's just it. You just do it. Um, it also took a lot of healing work, and in particular I focused on my subconscious because I could see that, like I said, I wanted a healthy relationship, but then the people I was choosing were not ready for that. Like they couldn't give me that healthy relationship. So I realized, okay, I have to figure out what this disconnect is about.
yeah,
So did a lot of healing. Again, like I told you, learned how to date for a healthy relationship, learned what it even looked like. I wasn't even sure what it looked like. And yeah, that's what eventually got me into this relationship I'm in now, which was, yeah, kind of like you, going for somebody who I wouldn't necessarily have gone for in the past. But with my partner now, yeah, I also felt drawn to him, very easy to talk to. It was like he was actually my friend first. We were just chatting here and there, but we connected as friends first, and then it kind of transitioned into romantic, and yeah, here we are now. But yeah, it was me consciously looking for the qualities that I wanted in a person and seeing like, okay, does he check them off? Okay, yep, here he's checking these off. Okay, let me move forward and see what happens. Yeah.
Very similar, but it just shows you that that's what you need to do. You need to actually change what you've been doing all this time and look at where can I do it a little bit differently, you know,
Yeah.
because this for me was the best thing, I've ever done. So
Same. I can honestly say that. Like I was thinking about this the other day. This is the first time I can ever say that like I'm truly happy in this relationship. That's new for me, which is crazy that I couldn't have said that before, even though it was like I thought I was happy, but I compared to how I feel now, no, I actually really wasn't. So we've been talking a little bit about our stories, but I'm curious what brought you to the work that you do today, focusing on helping single moms in particular.
yeah, so I've been a psychologist for like 17 years now, and it wasn't initially focusing a lot on single mums, but it's something that I've really enjoyed helping people, and I'm really passionate about it. And after I became a single mum, every time I sort of made a breakthrough or figured a new way to do something or started feeling better, I just remember having this automatic thought that, oh my gosh, I've got to teach other single mums how to do this. Like,
Yeah.
how can I do this? Like, how can I, teach them this? And I had all these ideas going through my mind, but I didn't sort of action anything because life was so busy, and I just kept going. But here I am now. And so eventually I really thought I've got to find a way to help the single mums to put together all the different things that I have learned that have helped me, with the professional experience that I've got, and I've sort of figured out this like step by step kind of methodology that I can now teach other single mothers to do the same thing, really just to rediscover who they are, because maybe that part was like asleep for a long time when they were in a toxic relationship,
Right.
um, and also just had to manage stress better and not be an automatic pilot all the time.
Mm. That is like the wisdom that you have is priceless because yes, you have all this experience as a psychologist, but then you also have the personal lived experience of going through something like this. So yeah, that sounds amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be able to share it. And tell me, what about for you? How did you get into this field of energy
Good
healing?
question. Yes. So I started out doing energy healing. I've been really passionate about it for many years, and I had gotten my certification, let's say about like a year or so before I started adding coaching. And I was getting clients, and a lot of them were going through similar situations. They were going through breakups, trying to get over bad relationships, trying to find healthy love. And so I was doing my releasing on them that I do with the energy healing. But then I also realized, oh, I have so much that I can share with them because at the time I was just learning all of this stuff about how to have a healthy relationship, how to date. So I ended up coaching them at the same time and I thought, "Oh my gosh, they're getting such great results. I should just do this coaching and energy healing together to help people break the cycle of bad relationships." So that's how I ended up here today. I love doing it because I'm always reading about healing relationships. I'm just so passionate about it. So it's like it takes the two things that I'm super excited about, which is energy healing and relationships, breaking the cycle of bad relationships, and I combine them and here I am.
Oh, brilliant! Such important work. So good.
We are both now in healthy relationships, and you and I have talked before about how the journey to first getting into the healthy relationship, but then once you're in the healthy relationship, creating that relationship and making sure it is healthy is not always easy. It's definitely a transition. There are ups and downs. And so if you have been in unhealthy relationships in the past, just like we have experienced, when you get into a healthy relationship, you can have triggers come up. Triggers from your past, from your childhood, triggers from your past toxic relationship, a toxic marriage. And those triggers can be really difficult because I know for me personally, when they were happening to me, I wanted to run away. I was like, oh no, I have made another mistake. I need to leave this relationship. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to share some stories about triggers that we've experienced, and then we're going to share some very specific steps for what to do when you're having a trigger so that you don't have to run. We have some ways to help you.
So the thing about triggers is that they're actually like a really natural and normal part of life. We've all, experienced them. And even if you think that, you've healed and you've come to terms with your past, you can still experience triggers. And, you might find yourself all of a sudden having a reaction that's completely out of proportion to the situation. And it can feel quite frightening. It certainly happened to me before, and I had to really step back and think, what just happened here? Why did I react this way? But it's actually a protective mechanism. This is why we have it. This is how we evolve. We evolved to deal with danger. So if something that we perceive in our mind as being dangerous to us in some way, we react to protect ourselves. And, you might be a feeling of panic or feeling overwhelmed in some way. It might be crying. It might be an outburst of anger, just reacting defensively or withdrawing. So there can be a whole bunch of different reactions. So it's important to kind of watch out for it, but it's also it is normal when it happens.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it was so helpful for me to learn that yes, like this is normal. Like it's not that you haven't healed enough and it's not that this is the wrong relationship. It's no, like you said, it's a protective response and it's normal and it's okay.
So do you remember a time for yourself when you were triggered? You can share.
Yes. Oh, I have lots because I've been triggered a lot. But yeah, I remember. And this, actually, I was going to say this still happens, but actually it doesn't in my relationship. It doesn't anymore. But in the beginning, when because my partner is sensitive just like me. And so when we would have something come up where either he would be upset or I would be upset, he would say, I need some space. I just need to process on my own. And that was very hard for me. I had a lot of anxiety with him needing that distance. And so we did a lot of work, him and I together. We talked to a mentor and figured out eventually how to have it so that he did get some space, but also to where I wasn't so triggered. But that was really hard for me. And when it first happened, I was like, oh no, this is this is someone who is unavailable. This is someone who is avoidant. Like I had these stories based on what I'd experienced in the past. That's not the case here. He is not those things, but that's just where my mind went. And so, yeah, it was really difficult. We had to do a lot of talking about things and just, I needed a lot of reassurance in the beginning. And yeah, it's fine now. It doesn't bother me now, but this is 3 years in. So
Yeah.
not always easy for me. How about you? What was something that you experienced, a trigger?
Yeah, so for me, one that comes to mind is that my partner and I, we had a conversation on the phone, and while we're on the phone, I wanted to tell him to look something up. It was actually like a reel I put on Instagram, and I said, I really want you to have a look at this. And so he's going to have a look at it. He can't quite find it, and I could hear his tone of voice changing. He was just getting a bit frustrated. And as I heard that change in tone of voice, I just felt myself withdrawing and basically saying, I can't talk now. Let's just talk later when you've calmed down and touch base then. So we hung up the phone and I got quite emotional, burst into tears, and I felt so overwhelmed and I couldn't figure out why. And I really had to think about it before chatting with him again. And as I reflected back, what I had realized, which was like a huge realization, was that because this all happened very quickly, while
Hmm.
I just felt myself withdraw and ended the phone conversation. And
Yeah.
as I reflected, what I realized was that I had picked up on what I thought was anger, even though it wasn't anger towards me. It was just a little bit of
Yeah.
irritability, if anything. But I had picked up on anger, and to me, anger meant danger, and danger meant run. And so it
Right.
was like super quick reaction, and so withdrawing from the conversation was me running. And when I had realised that, I phoned him back and we spoke about it, and he reassured me he wasn't angry at me, he was irritated with something else. And I also realised that I am safe with him, and this is
Hmm.
not. This is not something that was an unsafe situation either. So I had to remind myself, I'm safe, I'm okay, everything's fine. And but yeah, at the time it was quite scary for me because it was a very extreme reaction to something that really to the outside world wouldn't look like anything.
Right. Right. Because of what you had experienced in the past. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
exactly
that's
what I was
actually,
saying.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, sorry. So I was just going to say it's exactly what I was referring to, that like you're bringing your past into the present.
Yes, because yeah, it made me think of, this is like a lot of the work that I have been doing in my healthy relationship now is reorienting myself to realize, no, I'm currently safe. I am not in the past. I am not with these previous partners. This is safe. And so a lot of the work that I do is literally like orienting myself, like, okay, I'm touching the chair. I can see the gray wall. I can see my bed over here. It's like bringing myself to the present. That's a lot of what I've been doing
Yeah,
lately.
yeah, a lot of grounding, right? So,
Exactly.
right.
So this brings us to the second point that we want to make in this video, which is how to identify a trigger. And also, more importantly, how do you differentiate between a trigger and an actual red flag? Like, because for me, when I was going through this, that's often what I was thinking. I was triggered and I was going, is this a red flag? So I want to make it clear that what we're going to talk about today for the steps to dealing with triggers, this is for when you are already in a healthy relationship. You have very clearly identified that this is a safe person to be with. So, what we're really talking about here is when the relationship is healthy, it's going well, and then something happens and you feel a strong emotion. You're triggered, and then you wonder if this is a red flag, and maybe you might have missed something, and maybe this isn't the right relationship for you. And so, a trigger, and you can tell me if I'm correct here, Dr. Effie, a trigger is your emotional response to something.
Mm.
It could happen when there is an actual red flag present, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that comes from a red flag. It can literally be like what you and I talked about, just things happening in the relationship and you get an emotional response to them. Do I have that correct?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Our point here is that it can happen in a normal conflict that all healthy relationships have. Just because you're triggered, just because you're feeling an emotion, does not necessarily mean that this is a toxic relationship. So, I'm going to just very briefly talk about some examples of some common red flags that could trigger you, but are an indication that this is not a good relationship. Just in case you're watching this and you're like, I don't know if this, I don't know what this means in my relationship, this is for you. So, if physical violence is happening in your relationship, like if someone is angry and they are punching a wall or they are threatening you or they are hitting you, that is a very big red flag. Leave that relationship. Do not pass go, like get
Yeah.
out of there ASAP. Same
Mm.
thing with putting you down, name calling, anything like that where it feels like somebody is belittling you or making fun of you. That is a very clear red flag. Exit that relationship. And also, any habit that you are uncomfortable with, like excessive drinking, addictions, that is considered a red flag and not a type of dynamic where I would feel comfortable telling you to stay and work through that. Definitely not. That's a very clear red flag. So if those things are happening to you, exit the relationship. If you want to go really deep on the red flags and you're not clear what they look like and you want some additional information on that, then you can check out my Toxic Relationship Deprogrammer. I'll leave the link here in the video. So if you've figured out that you are in a healthy relationship, there's no red flags, and there's something that's triggering you in your relationship and you want to know, what do I do about it? Like, how do I move through that trigger? This is what we're going to help you with.
So what we're going to do is we'll walk you through 5 steps that Lindsay and I have spoken about that we have figured out really help you deal with triggers. And the first step, step number 1, is to pause for a moment, to really take that time to just take a step back, so that you can actually stop being emotionally reactive. So you notice that emotion come up, you pause before you react. And so you do this when you feel like a really intense emotional reaction is coming up, because that's your warning sign that you're having, that you're reacting to a trigger. And the second step is to do something that can actually calm your nervous system. And there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do. You could be having a good cry, which would be a release, to let those emotions out. You can take some deep breaths, notice the sensations in your body, really get curious about them. But there's also a technique that I can teach you that you can do to really help you deal with triggers as they come up. It's a little mindfulness exercise, so it helps you just be more present and notice what's happening in your body. So it really takes like a minute or 2 max of your time, and I'm just going to guide everybody through it so that you can have a tool that you can use when it happens. So what I just invite you to do is to notice first where that feeling is in your body. It might be in your tummy, like knots in your tummy. It might be in your chest. That's where I often feel it. And so just notice first where that feeling is in your body. And once you have a sense of where it is, you just put your hand on where that feeling is. So if it's in my chest, so I'll put my hand on my chest. And so this is a feeling of alarm in your body. And so we're going to really help that feeling. And once you put your hand, just allow the feeling. You don't have to fight it, like it, want it, just allow it. And what I want you to do now is just to breathe into it. It's as if breath flows into and around it. As if you're just spreading some warmth, loving kindness in the area. Not to get rid of it, just when you're ready, you can just take a moment to come back to the present. So that's how you do this little exercise.
That's so helpful, really. Like I don't have any trigger right now, but just doing it in this moment, I feel very relaxed. Just allowing everything to be there.
Yes, yeah, good. So the reason why this helps is because also a lot of times we spend so much time trying to fight the feeling, get away from the feeling, avoid the feeling, distract ourselves from the feeling. And actually all that ends up doing is we get deeper into the feeling. And, we also spend a lot of effort and energy doing that. So to actually deal with the feeling, you actually have to feel it.
Yeah.
And so you just allow it to be there. So, but you create that space around it, breathe into it, and that will get through it a lot quicker. So that was step number 2. And then step number 3 is to really break down step by step what just happened here. Okay, because once your nervous system has calmed down, it's easier to think more clearly. So everything, what just happened here? Why did I react this way? A bit like my example before where I thought, okay, I picked up anger, I thought that meant danger, and so on. So I had to really, in my mind, to even get to that step, go through step by step through, I said this, he said that, and so on, until I realised what actually happened rather than the assumption I made.
Right. Because the next step after you've figured out what happened here, and maybe you even want to write that down. I know I used to do that, like, because I was emotional in the moment and I had to get it out of my system, kind of like get it on paper, is then to figure out how you interpreted what happened. like you said, we make so many assumptions. And I know, like, for me, in the example where my partner wanted distance, my assumptions were he doesn't like me anymore. He wants to leave the relationship. He's mad at me, when that wasn't actually what was happening. But I needed to get clear on what I had made that particular behavior mean. So you might want to write that down too. And I'm curious, for anyone watching here, if you can relate to what we're talking about, like if you have been triggered and you have made assumptions, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear. And so the last and final step, once you have figured out how you interpreted what happened, like the stories that your mind has been telling you, you bring those to your partner and you talk it through. Because I know for me, most of the time, my assumptions were absolutely not true. My partner didn't, like, he still liked me. He still wanted to be in the relationship. He wasn't upset at me. He just wanted some space to process, which actually I was realizing, Dr. Effie, as you were talking about it, he was doing the right thing. Like, he was emotional. He needed to take that time out. He's a therapist too, so he probably just knew that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so bringing your assumptions to your partner can be so healing on a number of different levels, because you can see that, oh, these assumptions are not actually true. And then what it does is it also brings you closer to each other, because you're sharing vulnerably what you felt and how you interpreted it. And often they can share, no, I didn't feel that way. And the two of you can become closer. So it's a really helpful thing to do.
Yeah, that communication is so important. You're going to learn more about each other that way, and how you react to certain things, and you can be a bit more sensitive then to certain reactions, and reassure your partner, okay, you reacted that way because you assumed I was doing this, but you actually meant that. So
Right. This is like healthy relationship 101 here. Like, this is how you do it. You know, this is conscious relationship. This is what it looks like. It's very deliberately taking ownership of your triggers, your emotions, and
yes,
communicating about them in a respectful, kind way.
yes. So in summary,
Yes.
triggers are a normal and natural response when you're experiencing the past in the present. And they happen even in healthy relationships, and they happen even if you feel that you've healed and you've done the work to move past your past experiences. And, there is a way to work through them. And as you work through them, it can actually strengthen your connection with your partner. And so it's really important. We've both realised that when you're triggered in your relationship, don't put yourself down for reacting in that way. Okay? Don't suppress your emotions, as we've said before, and don't run away from the situation. Allow the feeling to be there, stay with it, and then you can actually deal with it.
That's so good, because yeah, even as you're talking, it's like I even still to this day need that reassurance that yes, no, all of this is normal. Your triggers are okay. They're normal. It's supposed to be happening. And ultimately, it's a good thing because it can bring the two of you closer together.
Yes, yeah. I think, a lot of times people feel that if they're triggered, okay, they're not healed, and so therefore that means they've got to do a lot of work. They're not ready for a relationship. And, look, some of the time, yes, as both of, you and I have said, like, we needed to spend some time to heal and get some supports, whether that's therapy or self-development courses or coaches. So, yeah, you need to spend that time doing that. But that does not necessarily mean that you've, gone back to square one just because something has triggered you. Completely normal and natural for that to happen.
You're so right, and I'm also glad you're bringing that up, because I hear that a lot. Like people that come to me and say, like, I have to be fully healed, perfectly healed in order to have a healthy relationship, and it's just not true. Like, emotions are normal. We all have them, and if you can do the things that we talked about today, you can have a beautiful relationship while still having some emotions.
Yes, yeah, because also I think, as you and I've realised, you often don't even know any of that until
Right.
you get into a relationship. So how would you work on it before getting into one,
You're
right?
so true. It's so true. You can't do it by
Right.
yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Not like, let me just, do therapy on all the possible triggers I could possibly
Right.
ever have in my life into a relationship. You can have two people that can communicate well, that come into the relationship together, that are maybe unhealed in some ways from their past, but you can work through together and get stronger together.
Dr. Effie, thank you so much for joining me here. This was so helpful, and I hope it's helpful to all of you watching. So, if you are a single mom and you want to learn more about you and your work, where can people find you?
Okay, thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for having me. This was such a great chat. So people can find me on Instagram. You can follow me. My handle is at underscore doctor, so dr.fefi. And when you go to my page, you can find the different ways that I can support you. There's a program that I'm going to be launching soon for single mums to rediscover themselves and learn, my methodology for handling stress. So that's something that you can find there, along with other tips and strategies to manage the single mum life.
I highly recommend following you on Instagram. Your account is so fun and so inspirational and helpful. So yeah, follow her on Instagram.
Thank
And
you.
if you want help with decreasing the intensity of some of the triggers that you're experiencing, that is my specialty. This is what I do in my Living Free Finding Love program. We do the energy healing, we do the subconscious work so that you can feel more present and calm in your relationship and really be able to let that healthy love in. So if you're interested in that, I will leave the link in the description also.